Welcome to this week's episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. Grab a seat at the table as Masters rowing coaches Marlene Royal and Rebecca Caro share their biggest secrets on how to unleash your hidden potential and plot a new course for real results on the water and off. Now, on to the show.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. I'm Rebecca Caro, and today I hadn't planned on doing a show because it's coming up to the Easter holidays, but I learned from Mike Wagner's post on social media this morning that the coach Jimmy Joy had died. Now, Jimmy was a really important person to me, and so I thought I would get online and share some of my own personal memories and recollections and share with you some of the things that Jimmy has done to advance the sport of rowing, and tell you a little bit about, if you're interested, where you can find out more about him, his philosophy of coaching, and what he did. Now, I'm not an expert in his coaching practice. We never met. We had a very long and ongoing correspondence for many years. And Jim was one of those coaches whose drive to share what he had learned shaped an enormous amount of what he gave back to the sport. Some of the things I'm going to say may be factually incorrect, so please tell me if I've got them wrong, but it's my belief that he was one of the very first coaches in the USA who really emphasized sculling as being an important part of becoming a well-rounded athlete. For many years, he ran a conference called the Joy of Sculling, and one of the first correspondences I had with him was around this conference, and he very generously sent me a CD of every single presentation that was presented at that year's event to me living in the UK, just because he sensed that there was a student there who wanted to learn. And he, I think, saw himself as a conduit for other people into the depths of understanding that rowing and sculling can bring, and the joy, fortunately also his surname, that it leaves in someone's life with a lifelong practice of athletic activity. At the time when I first met Jim, or I say met, corresponded, I was running a business called rowperfect.co.uk. It was one of the early rowing blogs. That was how I started it. I started writing in 2007. And it came to be a resource, a place where people could go and find out all sorts of things about rowing. If you asked a question, it was one of the places where the search engines directed you to find answers. At its peak, I was writing 5 blog posts a week. These were bundled up into a weekly newsletter. And after the World Rowing website and the Concept 2 website and probably Row2K, it was probably the most visited rowing website in the world. Now, Jimmy regularly wrote things about rowing, which I felt came from a perspective that was unusual and which I hadn't seen anywhere else. He was very into the blend of the mind and the body, and how these two things need to come together for someone to be the complete sculler, the person who is in that flow state. I think he first became aware of it when he was writing a book called Hanlan's Spirit. Now, Ned Hanlan was a Canadian, a young man who lived on an island, I think in the St. Lawrence River, and had to scull to the shore in order to go to school. And he was one of the people who are part of our rowing history because he lengthened the rowing slides. He wanted a longer drive through the water. And Jim's book, Hanlan's Spirit, was published, and I believe it's still on Amazon if you are interested in reading it. I will say that there were various other things that Jim wrote and published, which he couldn't always find a commercial publisher for. And Row Perfect became a publishing house. We would publish books in PDF form in Mobi, which pre-Kindle format. And I tried to take texts that people wrote that they firmly, passionately believed in, and then use the platform of the Row Perfect blog and newsletter to publicize them. And so actually Row Perfect has printed and published several things that Jim wrote. The most recent one was from 2013, and he contributed a chapter. It was called How to Stop Worrying as a Coach. But the first and biggest piece that we published with him was called The Quantum Sculler, How to Become the All-Around Sculler. The essence of Jim's insight into this is the mind has to join the body. And he was a great believer in meditation and meditative practice as a means of helping the athlete get into the flow state. A lot's written about the flow state, and it is an amazing thing if you ever get into it. I once had a race. It was a first round women's eights event at Henley Royal Regatta. And the combination of the entire crew, the race outcome, and how we attacked and delivered the performance that we did is all summarized in the recently published book, The Greatest Rowing Stories Ever Told. And my chapter is called How I Achieved My Potential. But what I had during that race, and which I shared, as I discovered later, with several other members of the crew, was a genuine out-of-body experience. I remember coming down the last part of the course past the grandstands, and I had the vivid impression that I was above myself, looking down on myself rowing, and that I recall I had no consciousness about how hard I was working. I was just going through the motions, and it was effortless, easy, fluid. It was just happening, and I could push as hard as I wanted, and there was no pain in it, and there was no breathlessness, and it was just delivering this surging boat speed that pushed us down the course faster and faster and faster. And I think that is one of the things that Jim's description of the flow state is all about. That is actually the subtitle of his book, Hanlan's Spirit. It's called Training for Flow. And he believed that Ned Hanlan was one of the people who was really, really good at doing that athletically. But it is also something that he believed that people can learn. Now, I interviewed Jim once on the Rowing Chat podcast. So if you go to rowing.chat/Jimmy-Joy, you'll be able to listen to that episode. And I myself felt I need to listen to it again. I didn't have time to do this before recording now, but I think it will be a great tribute to him if more people heard what he had to say, because he was incredibly generous at sharing his knowledge. And I know that some of his ideas were not orthodox and were things that, you know how you sometimes hear something and you automatically reject it? I think that some people felt like that some of his ideas were quite woo-woo and a bit out there. But actually, the art of sculling is a meditative practice. And I think he had something. I think he had something that more people need to know about. And this might be worthwhile for you to investigate for yourself. So in honor of Jimmy and his thoughtful approach to sharing his knowledge while continuing to research it and to build more insight into our lovely sport, I'm going to end by reading some extracts from the Quantum Sculler. Higher consciousness awareness is achieved by walking your body through the movements with a deep, concentrated feeling for the intricacies of those movements. This is achieved by employing the slow motion sculling, You connect the consciousness with the various movements. With this method, gradually more and more of the pathways are moving towards Boehm's implicate level of operating. It is subtlety of movement that is developing. It's also imperative that we touch base with our deeper nature through our daily meditation sessions. Every aspect of the sculling takes on the quality of lightness, and it becomes pure joy to scull. This includes both the mind and the body. The movements become effortless. There is no struggle in the sculler's mind as he perfects his timing and his subtle execution of the release and the entry. The blade slides into and out of the water at each end of the slide. At this stage, the sculler approaches becoming an artist, and his sculling is an art form. With higher levels of consciousness and the attention to detail, the sculler should be aware of the controlled swing from the hips, the quick impact of the entry on the shoulders, the even power application on the blades during the drive, and the easy flow of the release and follow through. Attention is total awareness and is not the same as concentration, which is exclusive. Attention is inclusive, and we become aware of both the outward things and the inward things. Krishnamurti refers to this way of looking as choiceless awareness. With this method, you are never judging yourself. It means watching without choice. This all-encompassing awareness should also include seeing the firm quality of the movement of the shell's stern. However, this type of attentive awareness takes in everything, both in and out of the shell. The consciousness emphasizes thinking whole. We have to live our life in the shell and out of the shell as an exercise in wholeness. It becomes part of our greater spirit. Wholeness in sculling begins with our relationship with the equipment, the sculls and the shell. We treat the equipment with care and respect. Too often I see equipment thrown down on the dock rather than be carefully placed. Next comes our approach to entering and disembarking from the shell. We place one foot onto the track, holding onto the handles with one hand. Then with one foot on the edge of the dock, we push off and move the foot from the dock directly onto the foot stretcher, and at the same time sit down on the seat. Then place the second foot onto the stretcher. All this is completed in one athletic movement. These movements have to be performed every time we enter the shell and done with the very best of our athleticism. We must be completely aware of the exactness of these movements. Eventually, the consciousness level of the sculler should be one of feeling immanent and transcendent. Both qualities are present in the flow involved with the specific movements of the entry. The immanence is the more superficial aspect, the feeling of the various movements, and the transcendence represents the deeper aspect, the whole continuity of this easy movement. The latter is where the movement becomes intuitional. This is the flow of the movement. Eventually, the flow movement transitions to a deep state of awareness. It almost becomes spiritual in nature, in that the sculler achieves a relationship to the immensity of the universe and its qualities of continuous change. He begins to recognize the changes in his own being and relates those changes to the world around him. He realizes that the line is thin between the leaf, the tree, and the surrounding atmosphere. Where is the demarcation point? He feels that his body is experiencing the same with the thin line between himself, the shell, and the water. Here is a summary of the teaching and progression points. This is a progressive upward spiraling process of development for the athlete and for the coach. This practice of sitting can be performed before a piece and can also be done after a practice session. The development of our consciousness has certain specific practices and modes of thinking, as outlined below. 1. Developing comfortability with the sitting position and good posture and breathing techniques. 2. Recognizing the immediate benefits, developing patience, control of body and mind, the stillness in oneself. 3. Recognizing how these qualities benefit one's life and sculling. 4. Beginning to recognize the power developed inside oneself that parallels the power developed externally by the physical training. 5. Recognizing through this consciousness training how we're all connected and rely on one another. We cannot achieve alone. Wives, loved ones, family, other athletes, our teachers and mentors, and our coaches all contribute to our success. 6. We develop the ability to remain in the present moment. Time becomes cyclical rather than linear. We begin to develop a quiet, humble, and egoless strength. It is one of understanding, caring, and empathy, quite a contrast to the usual aggressive approach. 8. We become accustomed and conditioned to sitting for longer periods with a focus on developing attention. 9. We embrace our surroundings and the natural world. We are deeply ecological in our outlook on life. 10. The mind becomes steady, calm, and non-attached and non-judgmental. 11. We maintain balance and harmony between thinking, breathing, and sensing. This is sattva from the ancient Vedic tradition of wisdom, and it relates to creativity. 12. The union between the stillness of the body and the stillness of the mind becomes a deeply felt experience. This has profound carryover value for aspects of life, education, and occupational. He finishes by saying, each of these items above can serve as a mantra or focus for your daily sitting practice. You simply concentrate on one of these items. And so, Jimmy, I wish you all the best in your journey to the sculling afterlife. I am so grateful for everything that you shared from your own knowledge, insight, and practice in coaching, rowing, and sculling. And I very much hope that I helped to get your ideas out to more people through the Row Perfect blog and through the sharing that you so generously gave of all of your ideas and insights. Your openness to new things, to updating your thinking and training and coaching was an inspiration to me, and now I hope to many more people. Rest in peace, old friend.
We are part of the Rowing Chat Podcast Network. Please tell your rowing friends about the show. And if you've learned just one helpful thing from today's episode, please consider supporting the show for as little as $1 per month by visiting fastermastersrowing.com/podcast.